So my name is Tyrone Hayes. I'm a professor in the Integrative Biology Department at the University of California at Berkeley, although I originated in South Carolina, and I like frogs. Frogs always fascinated me, I think because of their complexity, the ability to live in water and on land, and watching them metamorphose, watching tadpoles turn into frogs. I think those are the kinds of things that fascinated me. And my grandmother lived next door to a big field. It was actually a graveyard, but the water would fill up, and the toads would literally migrate through her yard to go to the ponds to breed. And every weekend, my parents would drop us off, and we spent every weekend at my grandmother's house. And I think that's where the whole frog thing started. The hardest frog I ever caught, and gosh, I'm not going to remember the name now. It's on film though, you can see it. So in Borneo, there's a frog that lives in waterfalls, and it's a tiny little thing, and and it can probably like jump higher than the ceiling, but then it's also disappearing in the slippery rocks into a waterfall. Incredibly hard to catch. And there's another thing in Kenya that they call the rocket frog. The same thing. I can't exaggerate how far this little frog can jump to. They're very wary. You walk up and then bing, it's like 15 feet away and it's gone. Some frogs are pretty easy. Toads are pretty easy to catch. There are lots of frogs that are difficult to find, not necessarily hard to catch, but either they live way up in the trees or underground. So there's several. It reminds me of one. There's a little frog in Zimbabwe called Breviceps. I don't think it has a common name. And it's a cute, tiny little thing. The males take care of the eggs and the babies, and they live underground. And so you could hear them. They don't live in water. They actually live on land. And they kind of make this sound that goes, "Hurr, hurr, hurr," and you can hear it coming from underground. And I remember being in Zimbabwe, and you can hear them in downtown, Harare in Zimbabwe, in that little strip of grass between the sidewalk and the road. I've never seen one. I can hear them. I know that they're below my feet. I've never been able to find one. So it's not that it's hard to catch. You can't find the thing. Yeah, my son did a lot of work with me when he was little, and he's featured in here. Spent a lot of time, and then he went through his teenage time when he wanted to have nothing to do with dad for a little bit. But now he's back into biology. He's actually decided to major in biology, and he's been going out on his own and looking at frogs and looking for research that involves frogs and things. My daughter was when she was younger. My daughter's named after a frog, of course, Cassina. When she was younger, and now she spent a little time when she was like, nah, I don't want to deal. She still has her pet frog, Cassina, this little frog. But she's just starting to get back into biology now. I don't think my wife likes frogs. I think there's a book featured in here called "What Is a Frog?" that I always make this joke. My mom says it was my favorite book. I don't remember it, but and obviously she kept it and hung on to it. This book, which I still have in my home. I actually don't remember it, but my favorite books were when I was a kid. We did every Sunday. We went to the public library in Richland County Public Library, and we got books, and it was usually nature guides or nature books, and we had if you told me I'd have brought them because I still have them all. There were these books called How and Why. I don't even know if they still make those. The How and Why book of dinosaurs, the How and Why book of geology. I think I may have some in my office. But I would buy those at the 7-Eleven. And like I said, I literally still have them all. I think I had the whole series. And then my parents ordered for us highlights. Did he still have that? Highlights? And we read highlights. We got one, once a month or something like that. And then we used to have, it wasn't called Book of the Month Club, but it was where you get the thing and you fill it out and get books at school. What is that called? It's like a little weekly reader or something, and you could order books. And that was always exciting too, because then they got delivered. The Highlights magazine got delivered, and and again, I still have one of those too. I remember there's one called, I may have it in my office, called the coelacanth, and it was about this big ancient fish that had been rediscovered. It was one of my favorite books because again, it was this idea of discovery, and you might know that actually one of my graduate students and another graduate student discovered another population of coelacanths. It was a very famous story a few years ago here. So again, it was one of those, like, things come full circle. They discovered one off the coast of, somewhere in the South Pacific. Other favorite books. I loved reading books about Native Americans. I remember there was one called was it The Red Pony? And again, it was because it was people living in the, and I would dream of like La Brea Tar Pits. I still haven't seen the La Brea Tar Pits because whenever I'm down there, it's Sunday and it's closed on Sunday. But I remember reading a book about not only the discovery of La Brea Tar Pits, but there was another book about what life was like in California before, humans came over, and when there were saber-toothed cats and mastodons and mammoths and things like that in North America. So I read that kind of stuff. And then as I got a little bit older, I read a lot of science fiction, a lot of science fiction fantasy stuff, dragons and people who wrote on dragons. And there was a guy named, an author named Clifford D. Seamak, who wrote books. Most of his books were things about, like there was one called Mastodonia. And there were books where people went back in time, or where time got mixed and you had prehistoric, like The Time Machine. That was another one of my favorite. I was a little bit older then, but because the idea that you can go back and forward in time and see what things are like and all that. Yeah, there's always been a bit of sort of or not to do, not to sort of go with the flow, I guess just do my own thing and be myself, and that, to be confident that, and not confident in the sense that I know I'm going to win, but I'm going to do the best I can. And man, if you can knock me down, good on you, But know that I'm not going to make it easy for you. Yeah. Well, and I think even in my teaching, I think there are two people I think have contributed. One is my grandmother, who had a gift for explaining things to people and providing knowledge, and the other one is my dad, who he just knew how to tell a story, And so you can be a boring lecturer and say, "Hey, we're going to talk. Here's the story." I like to take a minute to spit a rhyme in it, because where I come from, that's how we do. So let me remind you, don't put this behind you. Atrazine ain't a good thing. It causes male frogs to grow eggs, contributes to extra legs, and exposed males don't want to sing. And now if that ain't enough, when you combine this stuff with a few other pesticides, it causes greater than additive effects, unpredictable defects, and to use the technical term, they's all messed up inside. Exposed larvae don't grow, and they develop slow, and they contract diseases that otherwise could be beaten. You see this exposure affects their composure and determines who's going to eat and who's going to be eaten. And now when we tested this scenario at Santa Margarita, when those frogs were injected, they weren't affected, but that's the result we expected to get. But they got sick and died at Salinas, but let's keep that between us, because I ain't published that yet. And when I do, how will it affect you? You may never know. Because if the EPA has their way, it might take 40 years or more. And while I'm on the EPA, I got to replay this and ask, how can they say this when this effect occurs at levels that they're barely capable of detecting? Where they're an agency for sure, but the way they keep avoiding the cure, I'm starting to wonder exactly what it is they're protecting. So if you're sitting there thinking that the water you're drinking is fine, well, that ain't the case. Because you see, this endocrine disruption that leads to biological corruption is relative to all species, including the human race. So what, you might say, who cares anyway? If somehow you still don't see the connection to you, I'm here to remind you that your son or daughter will develop in water just like my tadpoles do.